The Kethmori accelerated their extermination campaign.
17 colonies eliminated in the past cycle. They're not even bothering to claim territory anymore. This is pure genocide for entertainment.
Response options?
Entire cities reduced to ash.
Desire practically for the offensive parameter. The nearest take 40 spots up to that reset secretary for any chance to find a price.
The Kethmori Empire has accelerated their extermination campaign, reported Intelligence Director Vossel, his 6 eyes never leaving the horrific footage. 17 colonies eliminated in the past cycle. They're not even bothering to claim territory anymore. This is pure genocide for entertainment. The assembled representatives of the galaxy's major species watched in grim silence. The council chamber, a massive dome that could house thousands, felt oppressively quiet despite containing over 800 delegates. Above them, holographic stars showed the expanding red zone where Kethmori death fleets roamed unchallenged. Response options? Asked Prime Counselor Thalix, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Limited, Vossel admitted. The Outer Rim is beyond our practical defense perimeter. The nearest Council fleet would take 40 cycles to reach that sector, by which time every inhabited world will be dead. Military Command estimates we would need at least 12 full battle fleets to have any chance of stopping the Kethmori advance, and frankly, the political will simply isn't there. A murmur of uncomfortable agreement rippled through the chamber. The Outer Rim territories had been abandoned by the Council decades ago when the expansion costs became prohibitive. The colonies there were mostly refugees, outcasts, and pioneers who had specifically chosen to live beyond Council protection. It was tragic, but the mathematics of galactic governance were unforgiving. What about the Coalition of Free Worlds? Suggested Representative Mektar from the Trade Consortium. They have some presence in that region. Minimal, Vossel replied, manipulating the hologram to highlight friendly forces. A few patrol squadrons, maybe a cruiser or 2. Nothing that could stand against a full Kethmori war fleet. The Coalition has already withdrawn their remaining assets to more defensible positions. Ambassador Zethkara shifted in her biomechanical chair, her cybernetic implants processing the tactical data faster than her organic brain could follow. Something about the situation felt wrong, though she couldn't identify exactly what. In her experience, genocide campaigns like this usually prompted some kind of resistance, even if futile, but the reports from the Outer Rim showed only complete capitulation. What about distress signals? She asked. Surely someone is organizing evacuation efforts or calling for assistance. Bossel checked his datapad, confusion crossing his features. That's actually unusual. We've detected very few standard distress calls. Most of the intelligence we're receiving comes from our automated monitoring stations and long-range reconnaissance drones. It's almost like the colonies are going silent before the Kethmori even arrive. Mass suicide? Suggested another delegate. Rather than face Kethmori torture chambers? Possibly, though the temporal pattern doesn't match mass suicide protocols. The settlements are just vanishing from our sensors. Prime Counselor Thalix drummed her fingers against her console, a nervous habit that indicated deep thought. I want a complete intelligence review of the Outer Rim situation. Something doesn't add up here. In the meantime, we'll issue formal condemnation of Kethmori actions and impose sanctions. The chamber erupted in bitter laughter. Sanctions against a species that considered mass murder a recreational activity were about as effective as throwing pebbles at a star destroyer. 3,000 light-years away, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the Kethmori fleet approach New Harrison. The human colony had been evacuated 2 days ago through underground tunnel systems that didn't appear on any orbital scans. Now the settlement looked abandoned, though that was exactly what Sarah wanted. All ships report ready, Captain, announced Commander Rodriguez from his position at the tactical station. The surprise is locked and loaded. Sarah nodded, studying the approaching enemy fleet through the viewscreen. 12 massive Kethmori destroyers, each one capable of glassing a planet on its own. Their hulls were decorated with the bones of their victims, and sensor readings confirmed they were broadcasting torture signals from their previous conquests. These weren't just warriors, they were sadists who fed on suffering. They have no idea what's about to hit them, muttered Chief Engineer Yamoto from the engineering station. Her fingers danced across quantum field controls that existed nowhere else in known space. Honestly, Captain, I almost feel bad for them. Don't, Sarah replied coldly. They chose this path when they decided human children made good target practice. The Defiance was unlike anything in the galaxy's naval archives. At 3 kilometers long and equipped with technology that shouldn't exist, it represented humanity's response to a universe that had written them off as irrelevant. For 50 years, while the galaxy forgot about the small human settlements in the Outer Rim, Earth's hidden shipyards had been busy preparing for exactly this moment. Kethmori fleet entering weapons range, reported Sensor Officer Park. They're beginning bombardment of the surface installations. On the view screen, energy beams lanced down from the alien ships, turning empty buildings into molten craters. The Kethmori were thorough in their destruction, taking time to savor each explosion. They had no reason to expect resistance. In 3,000 years of expansion, nothing had ever stood against their fleets in open battle. Let them play with the decoys, Sarah said. How long until they realize the colonies are empty? Thermal sensors will detect the lack of life signs within 15 minutes, Park calculated. After that, they'll probably send ground teams to investigate. Perfect. That gives us time to position ourselves properly. Sarah activated the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 20 minutes, we're going to remind the galaxy why you don't mess with human settlements. I know most of you have never seen combat this intense, but I want you to remember something important. Every calculation, every simulation, every test we've run for the past 5 decades has led to this moment. We are ready. Humanity is ready. She paused, watching her crew at their stations. These men and women represented the finest Earth had to offer, trained in technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. They had volunteered for a mission that might well start a galactic war, and none of them looked remotely concerned about the odds. The galaxy thinks we're primitives playing with metal toys, Sarah continued. They're about to learn that humans don't just adapt to hostile environments. We master them. All stations report when ready. Across the ship, reports flooded in. Quantum displacement drives showed green. Adaptive armor systems were fully charged. The ship's AI, designation Artemis, confirmed all weapon systems were operating within acceptable parameters. Most importantly, the new technology that Earth's scientists had spent half a century developing was functioning perfectly. "Captain," called Rodriguez, excitement creeping into his professional tone. "The Kethmori fleet is moving into Formation Alpha 7. They're grouping for maximum psychological impact before the final bombardment." Sarah smiled grimly. Formation Alpha 7 was exactly what they had hoped for. It clustered the enemy ships close together for concentrated firepower, but it also created a vulnerability that human tacticians had identified decades ago. The Kethmori were predictable in their arrogance. "Artemis, begin active cloak dissolution," Sarah commanded. "Acknowledged, Captain." Initiating phase variance protocols, all stealth systems transitioning to combat configuration. The space around New Harrison shimmered as the laws of physics reasserted themselves. Where empty void had existed moments before, the massive bulk of the UES Defiance materialized like a metal mountain emerging from nothingness. Its hull gleamed with energy fields that shouldn't exist, and weapons ports opened to reveal technology that defied every known principle of galactic engineering. On the bridge of the lead Kethmori destroyer, War Leader Thaskmore felt his secondary heart skip a beat. His sensors were screaming warnings about massive energy signatures appearing from nowhere, but his mind refused to process what he was seeing. "Report!" he roared at his tactical officer. "Unknown vessel, massive displacement," came the panicked response. "Configuration unknown, power readings exceed classification parameters." It's bigger than our entire fleet combined." Thaskmore stared at the view screen in disbelief. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever challenged Kethmori supremacy in open space battle. Their technology was considered the pinnacle of military engineering, their tactics refined through countless victories. Yet here was a ship that dwarfed his entire fleet and radiated energy signatures that made no sense. "Identification?" he demanded. "Attempting to match against galactic ship registries," the sensor operator reported. "No match is found. Configuration is completely unknown. Wait, we're receiving a transmission." On screen. The view screen shifted to show the bridge of the alien vessel. Thaskmore found himself looking at a species he didn't recognize. Bipedal, relatively small, with strange features and an unsettling intensity in their eyes. The figure in the center wore a uniform that suggested military authority, and when she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone who had never known defeat. "Kethmori Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiance," the alien said calmly. "You are in violation of the Outer Rim Protection Accords and guilty of genocide against human settlements. By the authority invested in me by Earth Command, I order you to surrender immediately for war crimes prosecution." Thaskmore couldn't believe what he was hearing. This unknown species was ordering the might of the Kethmori Empire to surrender? The absurdity of it would have been amusing if not for the massive ship that somehow materialized from nowhere. "I am War Leader Thaskmore of the glorious Kethmori Empire," he replied, injecting as much intimidation into his voice as possible. "You will identify yourself and explain your presence in this system, or we will add your ship to our collection of trophies." The human female actually smiled at that threat. It wasn't the smile of someone facing impossible odds. It was the smile of someone who knew something her opponent didn't. "War Leader Thaskmore, you have 10 seconds to begin powering down your weapons and preparing for surrender. After that, I'm going to demonstrate why attacking human settlements was the worst mistake your species ever made." "You dare threaten the Kithmori Empire?" Thaskmore roared. "We have conquered 1,000 worlds and eliminated countless species. Your single ship, however large, cannot stand against our combined might." 5 seconds, Captain Chen said, completely ignoring his bluster. Thaskmore cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "All ships, combat formation Beta. I want that vessel destroyed immediately. Show these primitives what happens when they interfere with Kethmori business." The 12 Kethmori destroyers moved with practiced precision, their weapons charging to full power. Energy readings spiked as they prepared to unleash concentrated firepower that could vaporize most ships in seconds. But as they maneuvered into attack position, something impossible happened. The human ship simply vanished again. "Where did it go?" Thaskmore demanded, panic creeping into his voice. "Unknown. All sensors show negative contact. It's like it just ceased to exist." "Find it! Now!" Aboard the Defiance, now phased slightly out of normal space-time, Captain Chen watched the Kethmori ships spinning in confused circles as they tried to locate their target. "Phase cloak holding steady," reported Chief Yamamoto. "We can maintain this for approximately 18 minutes before quantum stress requires normalization." "That's 17 minutes longer than we'll need," Sarah replied. Rodriguez locked targeting solutions on all 12 ships. "I want this clean and precise. Targets locked, Captain. Quantum torpedo banks loaded with experimental warheads. Fire." The quantum torpedoes materialized inside the Kethmori shields, like ghosts becoming solid metal. For a brief moment, War Leader Thaskmore saw impossible objects appear throughout his fleet, each one the size of a shuttle but radiating energy patterns that made his instruments scream warnings. Then physics reasserted itself with devastating consequences. The explosions weren't just destructive, they were educational. Each warhead contained technology that demonstrated humanity's fundamental understanding of how matter and energy could be convinced to behave in new ways. The first destroyer simply ceased to exist, its atomic structure unraveling as quantum fields collapsed reality around it. The second ship experienced time dilation effects that aged its hull 10,000 years in 3 seconds. The third found its gravity generators reversed, crushing the crew against the ceiling while the ship imploded. Thaskmore watched his fleet die in ways that defied explanation. 9 of his 12 ships were gone in the first wave, eliminated by weapons that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. The remaining 3 vessels, including his own flagship, survived only because their positions at the formation's edge had placed them outside the worst effects. "Report!" he screamed, though his bridge crew was too stunned to respond coherently. 9 ships gone," whispered his sensor operator. "No debris fields. They just stopped existing. How is that possible?" Before anyone could attempt an answer, the human ship rematerialized directly above them. At this close range, Thaskmore could see details that his instruments had missed. The hull wasn't just metal. It was something that seemed to shift and adapt, displaying energy patterns that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Weapon ports opened along its surface, revealing technology that glowed with contained power. "All remaining ships, emergency scatter," Thaskmore ordered. "Maximum acceleration random vectors." But the human captain's voice cut through his communications like a blade. "War Leader Thaskmore, you now have 3 ships remaining out of 12. I could destroy them just as easily as the first 9, but I want you to understand something important. This isn't a battle. This is a lesson." The massive human ship paced his fleeing destroyers effortlessly, its engines producing no visible exhaust yet somehow maintaining perfect formation. It was like being chased by a mountain that had learned to fly. "You came to the Outer Rim expecting to find helpless prey," Captain Chen continued, her voice reaching every ship in the system. "You thought you could murder human families for entertainment and face no consequences. You were wrong." "Weapons charged and ready, War Leader," reported his tactical officer, though his voice shook with fear. "Fire everything," Thaskmore commanded. The 3 surviving destroyers unleashed their full arsenal. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroid-sized targets hammered against the human ship's hull. Quantum disruptors designed to tear apart molecular bonds washed over its shields. Gravitational mines that could collapse small moons detonated against its armor. The human ship absorbed every attack without even slowing down. Impossible, breathed Thaskmore's tactical officer. Those weapons should have destroyed anything in the galaxy. The galaxy hasn't met everything yet, came Captain Chen's voice. Artemis, demonstrate adaptive defense protocols. The surface of the human ship suddenly blazed with light as its armor began to shift and change. Where plasma beams struck, the hull absorbed the energy and redistributed it through crystalline channels. Where gravitational weapons impacted, the ship's structure flowed like liquid metal, spreading the effect harmlessly across its massive frame. It wasn't just defending against the attacks, it was learning from them. War Leader, his communications officer reported, we're receiving thousands of transmissions from across the galaxy. Our battle's being broadcast on all frequencies. Thaskmore felt his blood chill. If the galactic community was watching this humiliation, the political consequences would be devastating. The Keth Mori Empire's reputation was built on absolute military dominance. To be defeated by an unknown species would undermine their authority across 100 worlds. Jam all transmissions, cut external communications immediately. I cannot, War Leader. The signals are coming from the human ship itself. They're broadcasting our entire conversation, along with sensor readings of the battle. 3,000 light-years away, the Galactic Council Chamber had erupted into chaos. The holographic display now showed real-time footage of the engagement, transmitted directly from the mysterious human vessel. Representatives from across the galaxy watched in stunned silence as technologies they didn't recognize made the galaxy's most feared military force look like children playing with toys. "Is this some kind of simulation?" demanded Representative Mektar. "Those weapons effects don't match any known physics. Sensor telemetry confirms authenticity," Intelligence Director Vossel reported, his 6 eyes fixated on the impossible readings. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, but the quantum resonance patterns are definitely real." Ambassador Zethkara leaned forward in her chair, her cybernetic implants working overtime to process the incoming data. "Have we ever encountered this human species before?" Checking xenological archives, Vossel replied, "Yes, here it is. Humans were granted minor settlement rights in the Outer Rim approximately 57 years ago. Classification: primitive bipeds, early spaceflight capability, no significant military potential. Their homeworld was designated as a low-priority contact zone." Low priority? Zethkara stared at the display where a single human ship was systematically dismantling one of the galaxy's premier military forces. Their ship is the size of a battle station and equipped with technology that shouldn't exist. How did our intelligence services miss this? The human settlements maintained minimal external contact, Vossel admitted, clearly struggling to reconcile the archive data with current reality. They never requested council protection, never participated in interstellar commerce, never displayed any advanced technology during our sporadic contact attempts. By all accounts, they were exactly what they appeared to be. A primitive species trying to scratch out an existence on marginal worlds. Prime Counselor Thylix raised a hand for silence. "Are you telling me that in 57 years, this species developed from early spaceflight to whatever this is?" She gestured at the holographic display where the human ship was now demonstrating the ability to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "It appears so, Prime Counselor." "That's impossible. Technological development doesn't work that way. Even the most advanced species in our archives required centuries to develop significant military capabilities." On the display, Captain Chen's voice continued her broadcast to the galaxy. "This is a message to all species currently observing this engagement. For 50 years, humanity has watched the galaxy's conflicts from the periphery. We've seen empires rise and fall, witnessed countless wars, and learned from every tactical innovation and strategic mistake. We've had time to think, to plan, and to prepare." The camera view shifted to show the bridge of the human ship, revealing technology that seemed to blend organic and artificial elements in ways that defied classification. The crew moved with precision that spoke of extensive training, but their calm demeanor suggested this level of combat was routine for them. "Some of you may wonder how a supposedly primitive species developed such advanced capabilities," Captain Chen continued. "The answer is simple. You underestimated the human capacity for adaptation and improvement. While you were content with existing technology, we were busy inventing entirely new approaches to physics, engineering, and warfare. Back in the battle zone, War Leader Thaskmore was desperately trying to salvage something from the disaster. His 3 remaining ships had formed a defensive triangle, concentrating their firepower while broadcasting surrender requests to the human vessel. But Captain Chen seemed more interested in making a point than accepting surrender. "Artemis, demonstrate temporal displacement technology," she ordered. The human ship suddenly seemed to exist in multiple locations at once, its image fracturing across space-time like a broken mirror. Each reflection moved independently, surrounding the Kethmori formation with overlapping fields of fire. Taskmore's sensors couldn't determine which image was real, making effective targeting impossible. "This is beyond our capabilities to counter," his tactical officer reported. "Request permission to attempt escape." Granted. "All ships, maximum acceleration on random vectors. Scatter and regroup at Rally Point Epsilon." But as the 3 destroyers began their escape maneuvers, they discovered that space itself had become unreliable. Their navigation systems showed impossible readings, stars that existed in multiple positions, gravitational fields that shifted without warning, spatial coordinates that changed even as they were calculated. It was as if the human ship had transformed the local area into a maze where normal physics no longer applied. "War Leader," his navigator reported, voice shaking with fear, "we're trapped in some kind of spatial distortion field. Our engines are functional, but we're not moving relative to the human ship." Captain Chen's voice reached them again. "I want you to understand something, War Leader Thaskmore. The reason I'm not simply destroying your remaining ships is because I need witnesses. The galaxy has to know that humanity is no longer hiding in the shadows." "What do you want?" Thaskmore finally asked, his pride finally cracking under the weight of absolute defeat. "I want you to return to your empire and deliver a message. Human settlements in the Outer Rim are now under the protection of the United Earth Defense Force. Any attack on our colonies will be considered an act of war against Earth. Any species that chooses to target human civilians will face consequences that make today's demonstration look gentle." "You're declaring war on the entire galaxy?" Thaskmore couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Do you have any idea how many species will unite against you if you threaten the established order?" "Let 'em come," Captain Chen replied with quiet confidence. "We've spent 50 years preparing for that possibility, too." The space around the Kethmori ships suddenly returned to normal as the human vessel ended its temporal manipulation. Stars resumed their proper positions, gravity reasserted its familiar patterns, and navigation systems began functioning again. "You're free to go, War Leader Thaskmore. I suggest you use your journey home to consider whether your empire really wants to test human resolve." Thaskmore stared at the massive human ship, trying to understand how this engagement had gone so completely wrong. His fleet had been eliminated without scoring a single hit on the enemy vessel. Worse, the entire galaxy had watched it happen. The political ramifications would be catastrophic. "This isn't over," he said, though the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Yes, it is," Captain Chen replied. "You just don't realize it yet." As the 3 battered Kethmori destroyers limped away from the engagement zone, Captain Chen turned to address her crew. The bridge of the Defiance hummed with quiet activity as technicians monitored the departing enemy ships and prepared for the next phase of their mission. "Well done, everyone," she said. "Phase 1 of Operation Revelation is now complete. The galaxy knows we exist and they know we're not to be underestimated. Now comes the hard part." Commander Rodriguez looked up from his tactical station. "Orders, Captain? Set course for the Galactic Council home system. It's time to introduce ourselves properly." Chief Engineer Yamato raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's wise, Captain? We've just demonstrated capabilities that will terrify half the galaxy. Showing up at Council headquarters might be interpreted as a hostile act." "Everything we do from now on will be interpreted as a hostile act," Sarah replied. "The question is whether we control the narrative or let others define us. I'd rather have this conversation on our terms." The massive ship began to turn, its quantum drives building power for a journey that would reshape galactic politics forever. Behind them, the former battleground showed no evidence of the 9 destroyed Kethmori vessels. The human weapons had been thorough in their work, leaving no debris, no wreckage, no trace that the ships had ever existed. Across the galaxy, emergency sessions were being called in every major government. Military advisors pored over sensor readings that defied explanation. Intelligence agencies tried desperately to locate additional information about human capabilities. And in the deep space between stars, other ships began changing course, converging on shipping lanes and communication relays that would carry news of humanity's emergence to every corner of civilized space. The age of human isolation was over. What would replace it remained to be seen. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after the Defiance's demonstration. Representatives from across the galaxy had abandoned their normal schedules to attend, filling the Great Chamber to capacity for the first time in decades. The usual political divisions seemed meaningless in the face of what they had witnessed. Ambassador Zeth Kara studied the faces around her as she took her assigned seat. Fear, confusion, and barely controlled panic dominated the expressions of beings who thought they understood the universe. The holographic recordings from the battle continued to play on secondary screens, showing impossible weapons and technology that made every military advisor in the galaxy question their fundamental assumptions about physics. Prime Counselor Talix called for order, though her own composure seemed fragile. We are here to discuss the implications of what we all witnessed in the Outer Rim. Intelligence Director Vasul, please brief the Assembly on what we know about this human species. Vasul approached the central podium, his 6 eyes darting nervously around the chamber. What we know could fit on a single datapad, he began. The humans made first contact with our expansion scouts 57 years ago. They were granted minor settlement rights in the Outer Rim territories, specifically because their technology appeared primitive and their expansion minimal. All subsequent contact attempts were either ignored or politely declined. Ignored? Interrupted Representative Caxthul of the Hegemony military bloc. How does a species go from ignoring us to building ships that defy known physics? That's what we're trying to determine, Vasul replied. Our xenological teams classified humans as a typical Class Civity 4. They showed no signs of advanced technology beyond basic fusion drives and energy weapons. Their settlements were small, their population limited, their industrial capacity negligible. Either your intelligence services are completely incompetent, declared War Counselor Grixmar of the Talon Fleet, or these humans have been deliberately deceiving us for half a century. Ambassador Zefkara activated her speaking privilege. What about their homeworld? Surely we have detailed surveys of Earth's capabilities? That's part of the problem, Vasul admitted. Human space was classified as low priority for detailed surveillance. Earth itself was surveyed only once, 32 years ago. The results showed a typical industrialized world with approximately 8 billion inhabitants, standard defensive installations, and unremarkable military capabilities. 32 years ago? Representative Mektar leaned forward in his chair. Are you telling us that we haven't conducted a proper intelligence assessment of their homeworld in 3 decades? The Outer Rim territories were considered stable and non-threatening, Vasul said defensively. Our resources were focused on more pressing concerns in the core sectors. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives realized the full scope of their intelligence failure. A species had developed game-changing military technology under their very noses, and the galaxy's premier information service had completely missed it. Prime Counselor Thalix restored order with some difficulty. What we need to determine is whether the humans represent a direct threat to Council authority. Military Advisor Brentok, your assessment? Fleet Admiral Brentok, a veteran of 40 campaigns against various rebellions and invasions, stepped to the podium. His scarred features showed the strain of analyzing technology that shouldn't exist. Based on the engagement recordings, the humans possess capabilities that exceed anything in our current arsenals, he stated bluntly. Their stealth technology alone renders our detection systems obsolete. Their weapons can apparently phase matter through shields, manipulate time-space relationships, and deliver yields that suggest they've solved problems in quantum mechanics that our scientists consider theoretical impossibilities. Could we match their capabilities if we focused our research efforts? Asked Counselor Vexith from the Science Collective. Perhaps, given enough time and resources, Brentok replied. But that assumes they remain static while we catch up. If they've achieved this level of advancement in 50 years, what will they be capable of in another 50? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Throughout galactic history, technological superiority had determined the rise and fall of civilizations. Species that gained significant advantages in weapons or defense typically used them to expand their influence, often at the expense of their neighbors. Has there been any attempt at communication since the battle? Asked Representative Yultara from the Diplomatic Corps. Several, Vasul confirmed. We've transmitted standard greeting protocols, requests for dialogue, and formal invitations for council membership. All have been ignored. They're probably too busy laughing at us, muttered someone from the back of the chamber. Before anyone could respond to that pessimistic assessment, the chamber's emergency alert system activated. A brilliant golden light flooded the dome as proximity sensors detected something massive approaching the council station. Report, demanded Prime Counselor Talix. Unknown vessel approaching on a direct vector, announced the station's AI. Configuration matches the human ship from the Outer Rim engagement. Estimated arrival in 4 minutes. The chamber descended into chaos as 800 representatives tried to speak at once. Some demanded immediate evacuation, others called for military response, and a few suggested attempting to hide until the humans departed. The idea that the mysterious ship had somehow crossed 3,000 light-years in less than a day added another layer of impossibility to an already incomprehensible situation. "Calm! Order!" Prime Counselor Thalix shouted over the pandemonium. "Fleet Admiral Brentok, what are our defensive options?" "Against that ship?" Brentok studied the tactical readings with growing dismay. "None. The Council Defense Fleet consists of 12 cruisers and 30 escort vessels. Based on what we witnessed, they might delay the human ship for approximately 30 seconds. Evacuation protocols. The station can evacuate approximately 2,000 beings in the next hour. With 800 council members plus staff, we're looking at significant casualties if this becomes hostile." Ambassador Zethkara found herself strangely calm as she processed the situation. Her cybernetic implants were running probability calculations at maximum speed, and every scenario ended with the same conclusion. Humanity held all the advantages here. The only variable was whether they intended to use them destructively. "Perhaps," she suggested, "we should consider that their arrival might represent an opportunity rather than a threat." "Opportunity?" Representative Nektar stared at her in disbelief. "They've demonstrated the ability to eliminate our most powerful military forces without effort, and now they're approaching our capital station. How is that an opportunity?" "They could have destroyed the council station from long range if they wanted us dead," Zethkara pointed out. "The fact that they're approaching suggests they want to talk, or they want to demonstrate their superiority by destroying us in person," countered War Counselor Grixmar. The debate was interrupted by another announcement from the station AI. "Human vessel has achieved stationary position at 3,000 kilometers distance. We are receiving a transmission request on standard diplomatic channels." Prime Counselor Thalix looked around the chamber at her fellow representatives. Fear still dominated most faces, but she could see curiosity beginning to replace panic in some expressions. After 50 years of contact attempts, the humans were finally ready to talk. "Accept the transmission," she ordered. The main holographic display shifted to show the bridge of the human ship. The same captain who had demolished the Kethmori fleet appeared on screen, though now she was wearing what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire rather than military uniform. Behind her, the alien bridge hummed with quiet activity. "Prime Counselor Thalix," Captain Shen said, offering what humans apparently considered a polite greeting gesture. "Thank you for accepting our communication request. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Defiance, representing the United Earth Defense Force, and by extension, humanity as a whole." "Captain Chen," Thalix replied carefully, "your arrival has generated considerable discussion among our representatives. We witnessed your engagement with Kethmori forces and found your capabilities impressive." "I hope it was educational as well," Sarah replied. "We felt it was important to demonstrate that humanity is no longer content to remain isolated in the Outer Rim territories. Your message was quite clear. What brings you to the Council Station?" "We're here to discuss the future of human-galactic relations. Specifically, we want to address some misconceptions that seem to have developed over the past 50 years. Representative Caxtool activated his speaking privilege. "What misconceptions?" Sarah's expression became slightly more serious. The belief that humanity is a primitive species that can be safely ignored. "The assumption that human settlements exist at the sufferance of more powerful governments. The idea that we're content to remain on the periphery while others determine galactic policy." "And what would you have us believe instead?" asked War Counselor Grixmar, his tone carefully neutral. "The truth," Sarah replied simply. "Humanity has spent the past 50 years observing galactic civilization, learning from your successes and failures, and developing our own approaches to the challenges of interstellar existence. We've concluded that the current political structure is inefficient, often unjust, and fundamentally unsustainable." The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives reacted to what sounded like criticism of the entire galactic order. Ambassador Zethkara watched Sarah's image carefully, noting that the human captain showed no sign of being intimidated by the hostile response. "You're proposing to replace the Galactic Council?" Prime Counselor Thalix asked when order was restored. "We're proposing to improve it," Sarah corrected. "The Council has done remarkable work in establishing trade protocols, mediating disputes between member species, and maintaining general stability across thousands of star systems. But there are gaps in your current approach that have allowed situations like the Kethmori genocide campaigns to develop. The Outer Rim is beyond our practical defense perimeter, explained Fleet Admiral Brentok. We cannot protect every settlement in the galaxy. No, but you can ensure that species which commit genocide face consequences that make repetition impossible. The Kethmori have been conducting extermination campaigns for decades, with minimal interference. That ends now. You're appointing yourselves as galactic peacekeepers? Representative Mektar's voice carried clear skepticism. We are accepting responsibility that others have abdicated, Sarah replied. Someone has to stop the Kethmori Empire before they eliminate every non-militarized colony in the galaxy. Someone has to ensure that refugee settlements have protection from predatory species. Someone has to demonstrate that genocide carries unacceptable costs. Ambassador Zethkara found herself intrigued despite the implications of what she was hearing. What exactly are you proposing? Partnership, Sarah said. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We want to fix the problems that make ruling necessary. We have technologies that could revolutionize defense, communication, and transportation across all Council territories. We have strategic insights developed from 50 years of careful observation, and we have the military capability to back up our diplomatic initiatives with force when necessary. In exchange for what? Asked Prime Counselor Thalix. Recognition of human sovereignty over our territories, representation in Council decisions that affect our interests, and cooperation in addressing the security challenges that threaten all civilized species. The proposal sounded reasonable on its surface, but Ambassador Zethkara's cybernetic implants were detecting subtle implications in the human captain's words. This wasn't just a request for membership, it was a restructuring of the entire galactic balance of power.
We would need to review the full details of such an arrangement,
Thalix said diplomatically. Of course. We've prepared comprehensive proposals covering trade agreements, technology sharing protocols, joint defense initiatives, and reformed conflict resolution procedures. We're also prepared to demonstrate our commitment to galactic stability by addressing the Kethmori situation immediately. What do you mean by addressing the Kethmori situation? Fleet Admiral Brentok asked. Sarah's smile returned, but this time it carried a distinctly predatory quality. War Leader Thask Moore should be reaching Kethmori space in approximately 6 hours. When he reports the destruction of his fleet to the Kethmori High Command, they'll face a choice: end their genocide campaigns and accept human protection of Outer Rim territories, or discover what happens when Earth's full military capability is brought to bear against their empire. You're threatening to destroy an entire civilization? War Counselor Grixmar sounded appalled. We're offering them a chance to change their behavior before destruction becomes necessary, Sarah corrected. The Kethmori Empire has built their entire culture around the systematic murder of helpless civilians. If they're unwilling to evolve beyond that, then they represent an ongoing threat to every peaceful species in the galaxy. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Humanity wasn't just announcing their presence. They were prepared to wage war against one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. The message was clear. Cooperate with human initiatives or risk becoming another object lesson in the consequences of opposing Earth. We'll need time to consider your proposals, Prime Counselor Thalix said. Of course. We'll remain in the area for the next 48 hours to answer questions and clarify any concerns. After that, we'll return to human space to prepare for the next phase of our integration into galactic affairs. The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in stunned silence. Through the transparent dome above them, they could see the massive bulk of the human ship holding position like a technological mountain floating in space. Its very presence altered the fundamental balance of power in the galaxy. Ambassador Zethkara stared at the impossible vessel and felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. After 3,000 years of political stagnation, change had finally come to the galaxy. Whether that change would prove beneficial or catastrophic remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the age of human isolation was definitively over. The galaxy would never be the same. War Leader Thaskmore arrived at the Kethmori home system of Kethval with his 3 surviving ships in formation, though the word formation was generous given their battered condition. His flagship's hull bore scorch marks from weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Kethmori armor, while the other 2 vessels showed signs of structural stress from gravitational effects that had twisted metal like clay. The massive orbital fortress that served as High Command loomed ahead, its bone-decorated superstructure reflecting the dying light of Kethval's red sun. For 3,000 years, this station had coordinated the expansion of the most successful military empire in galactic history. Its commanders had never known defeat, never faced a strategic challenge they couldn't overcome, through superior firepower and absolute ruthlessness. That was about to change. High Admiral Krathnox received the battle reports in his private command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing Kethmori territories across 17 star systems. Each display marked another successful conquest, another species eliminated or enslaved, another world added to the Empire's growing domain. The sight normally filled him with satisfaction, but today the reports from Thaskmore made celebration impossible. "Play the engagement recordings again," he ordered his tactical staff. The central hologram shifted to show the impossible battle in the Outer Rim. High Admiral Krathnox had already watched the footage dozens of times, but each viewing revealed new impossibilities. Ships that materialized from nowhere. Weapons that ignored shields and armor. Technology that seemed to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. "Analysis?" he demanded of his senior staff. "The enemy vessel displays capabilities that exceed our theoretical maximums in every category," reported Chief Tactical Advisor Yexgal, his voice tight with professional frustration. "Energy output that suggests power sources beyond anything in our databases. Defensive systems that adapt to incoming fire in real time. Weapons that phase matter through normal space barriers. Conclusions? This represents a paradigm shift in military technology. Our current strategic doctrine assumes that superior firepower and tactical coordination can overcome any opposition. Against an enemy that can ignore our weapons while delivering attacks we cannot defend against, those assumptions become meaningless." High Admiral Krathnox drummed his claws against his command console, a nervous habit that indicated deep thought. The Kethmori Empire had built its power through careful calculation of military odds and systematic elimination of threats before they could become serious challenges. But this human species had apparently developed from irrelevance to dominance without warning. "What do we know about their overall capabilities?" he asked. "Based on the engagement data, we can extrapolate certain conclusions," Yexgal replied, manipulating the holographic display to show tactical projections. "Their stealth technology allows them to operate undetected until they choose to engage. Their weapons can eliminate multiple targets simultaneously with minimal energy expenditure. Their defensive systems make them effectively invulnerable to conventional attack." "You're telling me they're undefeatable?" "I'm telling you that defeating them would require strategic approaches we have never needed to consider. The Kethmori way of war depends on overwhelming superiority and direct confrontation. Against an enemy that can choose the terms of every engagement while remaining immune to retaliation, traditional tactics become suicide." The implication sent a chill through the command center. For centuries, Kethmori doctrine had been simple. Identify threats, deploy overwhelming force, eliminate opposition. It was a strategy that had never failed because no species had ever possessed technology that made them truly untouchable. "Recommendations?" High Admiral Krathnox asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Strategic withdrawal from human-claimed territories," Yexgal said bluntly. "Immediate cessation of operations in the Outer Rim. Diplomatic outreach to determine human intentions and capabilities." The suggestion hit the command center like a physical blow. Kethmori warriors did not retreat from inferior species. The Empire's entire political structure was built on the assumption of military invincibility. To suggest withdrawal in the face of opposition was tantamount to admitting defeat. "Unacceptable," High Admiral Krathnox declared. "The Kethmori Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. We do not retreat from territories we have claimed through conquest, and we certainly do not show weakness when challenged by primitives who happen to acquire advanced weapons." "High Admiral," War Leader Thaskmore interjected from his position at the side of the chamber, "these humans are not primitives. Their technology suggests a fundamental understanding of physics that exceeds anything in our scientific archives. Their tactical coordination was flawless. Their strategic planning demonstrated complete knowledge of our operational patterns. Are you suggesting we surrender to them?" Krathnox's voice carried the tone that typically preceded executions for cowardice. "I'm suggesting we recognize reality," Thaskmore replied, his own fear overcome by professional duty. "My fleet was eliminated in minutes by a single ship. The humans broadcast the entire engagement to the galaxy, deliberately demonstrating their capabilities for maximum psychological impact. This was not random aggression. It was calculated warfare designed to modify our strategic behavior." "And what behavior modification do they expect?" Before Thaskmore could answer, the fortress's alert systems activated. Proximity sensors detected something large approaching from the edge of the system, moving at velocities that shouldn't be possible without generating massive gravitational distortions. "Report," High Admiral Krathnox demanded. "Unknown vessel, massive displacement approaching on direct vector," reported the sensor operator. Configuration matches the human ship from War Leader Thaskmore's engagement recordings. The command center fell silent as every warrior present absorbed the implications. The humans had somehow crossed the 17 light-years from Outer Rim to Kethval in less than 8 hours. Their ship was approaching the heart of the Kethmori Empire, apparently without concern for the orbital defenses, the home fleet, or the millions of warriors ready to die protecting their homeworld. Time to intercept? Krathnox asked. 6 minutes at current velocity. High Admiral, they're not even attempting evasive maneuvers. Approaching as if our defenses don't exist. All defensive platforms to full alert. Launch all available interceptors. I want every weapon in this system focused on that ship the moment it enters effective range. The next few minutes passed in tense preparation as the might of the Kethmori home fleet moved to intercept the approaching human vessel. Orbital defense platforms powered up cannons that could shatter asteroids. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases throughout the system. Capital ships that had never been seriously challenged prepared for the battle of their existence. But as the human ship approached the outer defensive perimeter, something unprecedented happened. It transmitted a message on standard diplomatic frequencies. Kethmori High Command, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Defiance. I am here to discuss the future of relations between our species. I request an audience with your senior leadership to address matters of mutual concern. High Admiral Krathnox stared at the communication console in disbelief. They're requesting a diplomatic meeting? After demonstrating their ability to eliminate our forces? It's a psychological warfare tactic, suggested Yexgal. They're forcing us to choose between appearing weak by accepting negotiations or appearing suicidal by attacking the superior force. Or, War Leader Thaskmore said quietly, they're offering us a chance to avoid total destruction by finding a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Krathnox felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. Kethmori honor demanded that challenges be met with overwhelming force. But tactical reality suggested that attacking would only result in the complete annihilation of his home fleet with no strategic benefit. Open communications, he finally ordered. The main screen shifted to show the bridge of the human vessel. Captain Chen appeared exactly as she had in the engagement recordings, calm, confident, and completely unintimidated by the massive defensive preparations surrounding her ship. High Admiral, she said, apparently recognizing his rank insignia. Thank you for accepting communication. I trust War Leader Thaskmore provided a complete report of our encounter in the Outer Rim. He did, Krathnox replied carefully. Your capabilities are... Noted. That makes this conversation much simpler. I'm here to offer the Kethmori Empire a choice regarding your future operations. Humans do not dictate terms to the Kethmori Empire. Today they do, Sarah replied without hostility. High Admiral, your species has spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare against opponents who shared your technological limitations. That era has ended. Humanity possesses capabilities that make conventional military resistance impossible. You can either adapt to this new reality or be eliminated by it. You threaten to destroy our entire civilization? I'm explaining the consequences of continuing your current behavior, Sarah corrected. The Kethmori Empire has built its entire economy and culture around the systematic murder of helpless civilian populations. That practice stops now, permanently. Krathnox felt rage building in his chest as the human captain calmly discussed the modification of Kethmori behavior as if she were addressing a child. And if we refuse your demands, then I'll demonstrate why that's not really an option. Sarah gestured to someone off-screen. And the space around the Kethmori defensive platforms suddenly filled with additional human ships. Dozens of vessels materialized from stealth, each one smaller than the Defiance, but radiating the same impossible energy signatures. They had approached undetected and positioned themselves for optimal firing solutions on every military installation in the system. This is impossible, breathed the sensor operator. Where did they come from? Humanity has been preparing for this conversation for 50 years, Sarah explained. We knew that ending the Kethmori genocide campaigns would require more than words, so we brought adequate persuasion. High Admiral Krathnox studied the tactical display with growing horror. The human fleet had achieved perfect positioning for a simultaneous strike against every defensive asset in the system. His home fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and caught completely off guard by an enemy that could apparently materialize ships from nowhere. "What are your terms?" he asked, the words tasting like poison. "Complete cessation of military operations against civilian populations. Withdrawal from all territories containing non-military settlements." reparations to surviving refugee communities from species you have eliminated, and acceptance of human monitoring to ensure compliance with these conditions. You want us to dismantle our entire empire. We want you to transform it into something that can coexist peacefully with other species. The Kethmori are excellent warriors and engineers. Those skills could be applied to construction instead of destruction, to protection instead of predation.
And if our people refuse to abandon their traditional way of life? Sarah's expression became genuinely sad.
Then they'll share the fate of every other species that chose self-destruction over evolution.
High Admiral, I'm not here because humanity hates the Kethmori. I'm here because your current path leads inevitably to your extinction. We're offering you a chance to choose a different future. The command center remained silent as Krathnox considered options that all seemed to lead to the same conclusion. Resistance meant annihilation. Compliance meant the end of Kethmori civilization as they had known it for millennia. But perhaps, if handled carefully, adaptation might allow some form of survival. We will need time to consider your proposals, he said finally. You have 72 hours, Sarah replied. After that, humanity will implement its own solution to the Kethmori problem. I suggest you use that time wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the human fleet holding position throughout the Kethval system. Their presence was a constant reminder that the age of Kethmori dominance had ended, replaced by a new reality where humanity held all the strategic advantages. High Admiral Krathnox stared at the tactical display showing human ships positioned around his homeworld. For the first time in his long career, he faced a military situation with no acceptable options. Victory was impossible, defeat was certain, and surrender meant the destruction of everything his species had built over 3,000 years of expansion. But as he studied the impossible technology displayed by the human fleet, a new thought began to emerge. Perhaps the choice was not between destruction and surrender. Perhaps it was between extinction and evolution. The question was whether the Kethmori people were capable of changing quickly enough to survive. 6 months after the Defiance first emerged from the void, the galaxy had settled into a new pattern of existence. The changes were subtle at first, then increasingly dramatic as the implications of human technology and philosophy spread throughout civilized space. Ambassador Zethkara stood on the observation deck of the redesigned Council Station, watching construction crews install new communication arrays that utilized human quantum entanglement technology. The upgrades would allow instantaneous communication across the entire galaxy, eliminating the weeks or months of delay that had previously hampered coordinated responses to crises. Impressive work, commented a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Captain Sarah Chen approaching, no longer wearing the military uniform that had intimidated the galaxy 6 months ago. Today she wore civilian diplomatic attire, though Zethkara suspected the human captain was no less dangerous in formal clothes than she had been in battle gear. Captain Chen, Zethkara said, offering the greeting gesture that humans seemed to prefer. I didn't expect to see you at the dedication ceremony. I wanted to observe the first test of the new communication network, Sarah replied, joining Zethkara at the observation window. It represents everything we hope to achieve through cooperation rather than conquest. Below them, technicians from a dozen species worked together to calibrate systems that would fundamentally change how galactic civilization operated. The sight would have been impossible 6 months ago, when most species barely trusted each other enough to maintain basic trade relationships. The integration process has been smoother than anyone predicted, Zethkara observed. Though I suspect that has something to do with the Kethmori example. Sarah nodded grimly. The Kethmori Empire's response to humanity's ultimatum had surprised everyone, including human strategic planners. Rather than choosing between destruction and compliance, they had requested assistance in completely restructuring their civilization. The transformation had been painful, sometimes violent, but ultimately successful. High Admiral Krathnox proved more adaptable than we expected, Sarah said. Turning a warrior culture into a peacekeeping force was never going to be easy, but his people have exceeded every expectation. Through the observation window, they could see a Kethmori engineering team working alongside humans to install new defensive systems. The same species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was now helping to protect refugee settlements and establish safe zones for developing civilizations. What changed their minds? Zethkara asked. Your demonstration of force was impressive, but I've never seen a proud warrior culture voluntarily abandon 3,000 years of tradition. Sarah was quiet for a moment, apparently considering how much to reveal. We showed them something they had never seen before, a vision of what they could become if they chose growth over stagnation. The Kethmori were magnificent warriors, but they had trapped themselves in a cycle of destruction that would eventually have consumed them along with their victims. And now? Now they're discovering that protecting life requires more skill, courage, and strength than destroying it ever did. The same qualities that made them effective conquerors are making them exceptional guardians. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the station's communications center. All personnel, prepare for quantum network activation test. Repeat, quantum network activation in 30 seconds. Around the galaxy, similar announcements echoed through council facilities, human settlements, reformed Kethmori outposts, and the various species' homeworlds. The new communication system represented more than technological advancement. It symbolized the unprecedented cooperation that had emerged from humanity's dramatic entrance into galactic politics. Network activation in 10 seconds, came the countdown. When the switch was thrown, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Information that previously took weeks to traverse the galaxy now moved instantaneously. Emergency warnings reached every corner of civilized space in real time. Diplomatic negotiations that once required months of delayed message exchanges could now occur as naturally as face-to-face conversations. Remarkable, Zefkara breathed as status reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Your people have connected every inhabited system in the galaxy with faster-than-light communication. The political implications alone will reshape how we govern interstellar affairs. That was the idea, Sarah said. Most of the galaxy's problems stem from the fact that information travels too slowly to allow coordinated responses to developing crises. By the time the Council learned about a threat in the Outer Rim, it was usually too late to intervene effectively. And now? Now we can actually function as a galactic community instead of a collection of isolated regions that occasionally exchange messages. The success of the communication network was just one example of how human integration had transformed galactic civilization. Human medical technology had eliminated diseases that had plagued various species for millennia. Human agricultural techniques were feeding refugee populations that would otherwise have faced starvation. Human defensive systems were protecting colonies that had previously been helpless against predatory expansion. But perhaps most importantly, human strategic thinking was reshaping how galactic civilization approached the fundamental challenges of interstellar existence. The refugee integration program has been particularly successful, Zethkara noted, checking reports on her personal data pad. 300,000 beings from 40 different species have been successfully relocated and established in permanent settlements. That's more refugee assistance than the Council provided in the previous century combined. Helping people find new homes is more efficient than cleaning up after genocides, Sarah observed, though it required convincing various species to accept multicultural settlements instead of maintaining strict territorial boundaries. The refugee program had indeed required significant diplomatic effort. Many species preferred to maintain separate colonies for cultural and biological reasons, but human sociologists had demonstrated that mixed communities were more stable, more prosperous, and more innovative than isolated settlements. Your people have interesting theories about diversity strengthening civilization, Zethkara said. It's not theory, Sarah corrected. It's demonstrated fact. Humanity spent most of its early history fighting wars between different cultural groups. We learned the hard way that cooperation produces better results than conflict, both economically and militarily.
Is that why you chose integration over conquest?
With your technological advantages, you could have simply imposed human authority over the galaxy. Sarah turned from the observation window to face Zethkara directly. Conquest would have been easier in the short term, but ultimately self-defeating. Ruling through fear and force requires constant vigilance and enormous resources. Building genuine cooperation takes longer, but produces more stable and prosperous results, though you were certainly prepared to use force when necessary. The Kethmori's situation required decisive action, Sarah admitted. But even then, we offered them choices. Destruction was never our preferred outcome. The transformation of the Kethmori Empire had indeed become the galaxy's most dramatic example of human diplomatic philosophy. Rather than simply eliminating a dangerous enemy, humanity had invested massive resources in helping them transition to a peaceful society. The process had required human advisors, technological assistance, economic support, and constant monitoring to prevent backsliding into old patterns. The results spoke for themselves. Former Kethmori death fleets now served as rapid response peacekeeping forces. Kethmori military engineers were designing defensive systems for vulnerable settlements. Most surprisingly, Kethmori cultural evolution was producing art, literature, and philosophical movements that celebrated protection and growth rather than destruction and conquest. What's next for human involvement in galactic affairs? Zethkara asked. Consolidation, Sarah replied. We've introduced new technologies and approaches, but lasting change requires time for societies to adapt and evolve. Our role is shifting from active intervention to supportive guidance. You're withdrawing from galactic politics? We're transitioning to a different kind of engagement. Direct intervention was necessary to stop immediate threats and demonstrate possibilities. But sustainable improvement requires that various species develop their own solutions to their own problems. As if to illustrate her point, the observation window showed a mixed crew of engineers from 6 different species working together to calibrate the new communication array. Humans were present, but they were advisors and coordinators rather than directors of the project. The communication network will be maintained and expanded by a joint technical council with representation from every participating species, Sarah explained. Human technology made it possible, but galactic cooperation will make it permanent. Zethkara studied the human captain's expression, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. Her cybernetic implants found nothing but genuine commitment to the principles Sarah was articulating. It was remarkable how completely humanity had avoided the trap of technological superiority leading to imperial ambition. Your species is unusual, she observed. Most civilizations that achieve significant advantages use them to expand their own influence and control. Most civilizations never experienced global near extinction from exactly that kind of thinking, Sarah replied. Humanity learned from its mistakes before expanding into space. We know what happens when superior technology is used to dominate rather than collaborate. And if other species had not been receptive to collaboration? Sarah's expression became serious. Then we would have done whatever was necessary to protect innocent lives and maintain stability. But we always preferred cooperation when it was possible. The conversation was interrupted by another announcement. All stations, this is Galactic Communication Control. Network test complete, all systems nominal. The galaxy is now connected. Across the observation deck, beings from dozens of species celebrated the successful activation of technology that would reshape their civilization. Human engineers shook hands with Kethmori warriors. Council diplomats embraced refugee leaders from species that had been written off as extinct. Scientists from competing research institutions shared data and theories that would accelerate technological development for everyone. Your people have given the galaxy something it never had before, Zethkara said, watching the celebrations. What's that? Hope. Sarah smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression Zethkara had seen from her. Hope is what we had when we first saw the galaxy from our little settlements in the Outer Rim. Hope that civilization could be better than just endless cycles of conflict and exploitation. Hope that technology could be used to solve problems rather than create new ones. Hope that different species could find common ground instead of just competing for resources. And now? Now we know hope is justified. The galaxy is becoming something better than what we found when we first looked up at the stars. As they watched, the status displays around the observation deck lit up with messages from across the galaxy. Trade agreements between former enemies, scientific collaboration between species that had never trusted each other, cultural exchange programs that would spread art, literature, and philosophy across interstellar distances. The age of human isolation was indeed over, but what had replaced it was not conquest or dominance. Instead, humanity had chosen to become gardeners of galactic civilization, nurturing growth and cooperation while remaining ready to prune away threats that could destroy what they had all built together. The galaxy had gone quiet when humanity's battlecruiser first emerged from the void, but what followed that silence was not destruction or subjugation. It was the sound of civilizations learning to speak with one voice, united in hope for a future that none of them could have achieved alone. In the end, the most profound discovery was not humanity's technology or military capability. It was the realization that in a universe vast enough to contain countless wonders, the greatest miracle was still the simple act of different species choosing to help each other reach for the stars.